The following is not a compilation of car crashes. I'll admit, I can get deep into a Neanderthal session of me like crash videos, but that's not what this is. The intention of calling out these stupid driving moves, in the biggest picture, is to prevent accidents. November 7th of 2020 marked 20 years of consecutive daily deaths on the roads in Texas. According to TxDOT, that's quote, over 70,000 innocent lives lost to preventable crashes. Did you hear that? Preventable. These videos are calling out just some of the ways accidents can be prevented. It might entertain some, and I see nothing wrong with that. But it might teach a driver what not to do on the roads. And that is what matters to me. Welcome to Driving an SATX. This channel is about driving. Don't bring your ignorance and hate into my comments section. Stop signs are very simple. They say one word: stop. So stopping is definitely a must. But something a driver must understand before having a license issued to them is that you must stop before the sign, not roll your entire vehicle out past the sign into the intersection. This is not considered a legal stop. It's also dangerous and could cause an accident. I know I've expressed this before, and I'm sure you've heard this stated with other dashcam videos, but the wide-angle lens that these cameras have make it seem like there's more room than there really is. So if it looks like there's a little room, there really isn't room. And if it looks like there isn't room, there's no room at all. It's frustrating to have to deal with drivers that don't respect the danger in moving into a lane when it isn't safe to do so. Like this driver. She forced her way into this lane when there really wasn't room. Of course, I immediately think this person probably needs to turn right at the very next chance. Otherwise, that would have been a very stupid, very pointless maneuver. But then she passes 1, 2, 3 driveways, and as I pass her, she shows no sign of turning anytime soon. I guess we all know what that means. Just like any other day, here's a random driver who isn't paying attention and is out here making dangerous moves as a result. Here we are again with these giant signs. You'd think these were a new concept with how people seem to not regard them at all. But this one here is showing that the left lane, it specifically says left lane, is to exit 35 north. For the drivers who refuse to learn the highway number system, and there are a bunch in this town, it specifically indicates that this is the way to Austin. And of course the markings on the ground for the drivers who like to stare at the blacktop instead of looking down the road. Then there's this driver, who just drove under the same sign we saw, and just drove over the markings on the ground. We drive over additional markings, and as we approach yet another giant sign, this driver actually gets an opening to move over if they aren't wanting to go 35 north. You know, toward Austin. Taking that opening would have been the logical thing to do right now. But there I go again, trying to apply logic when others don't bother. Instead, the driver decides to make the lane change here, as though this caught him completely by surprise. As I'm approaching this intersection, the bus is pulling away from the stop after picking someone up. This bus is equipped with these very large blinkers, which the driver has activated at this point. The driver of this BMW should have let the bus go, as they did have room to allow this, and the bus really has nowhere to go. The BMW driver is way too bothered to be considerate and let the bus in. Never mind that pulling through an intersection behind a tractor trailer isn't going to move very quickly in the first place. Then there's this driver, who drives like an even bigger jerk because this bus is now running out of intersection. The driver had plenty of time to see this developing and knew they should have stopped, which is why they slam on the brakes at this point, but then, like a toddler, says, "No, I'm going, not you." Here I am sitting in traffic on Bandera when along comes a Honda who was just too important to wait in line like everyone else. So he decided to drive on the grass to get up to the red light. Then once he gets a green light, he hits the gas to make a U-turn, and from the looks of it, he might have wet his shorts just a tiny bit. Some drivers make mistakes here and there. Just because we call them mistakes doesn't mean they aren't necessarily dumb, dangerous, or possibly fatal. But some drivers' mistakes began when they sat in the driver's seat, because they're out here just f***ing up everywhere they turn. As I approach this intersection, I'm getting ready to move over to the right lane here, when this guy disregards the short distance and comes out anyway. I proceed to move into the turn lane, and he decides he needs that lane too. Yet when he turned out, he passed over it. Now he's jumping in front of me again with even less space this time. At this particular intersection, the right lane is a turn only, and it even has its own arrow. Plus, it allows cars to turn on red Of course, if the road is clear of traffic and it is safe to do so. It just sucks when you end up behind someone who decides to use a red light as a chance to get caught up on tasks that aren't even relevant to their driving. For example, catching up on your text messages or Facebook posts. Because they focus on something other than driving, they do things like sit through opportunities to get on their way, causing the rest of us to have to wait for them. As I pull up to this intersection here, I first want to point out this lane, which is a turning lane going into this entrance to the mall. Move up a few frames, notice these two vehicles sitting in the lane next to the turning lane, waiting for an opportunity to advance through the intersection. These two vehicles actually want to turn in here, like these cars are doing, but they fail to position themselves in the correct lane. I've said this before, this happens. It's okay. But what's not okay is when people decide to disregard laws and safety and inconvenience a bunch of other people on the road to avoid the inconvenience that's a result of their own fuck up in the first place. That's just garbage. Something I've discussed in previous videos is how some drivers may experience that their brake pads wear out faster than others. There's no mystery to this if this is anything like you. As the sun sets, we're driving down Military here. This driver in the next lane has no vehicles in front of them. But despite this, brakes. Not only brakes, but rides the brakes a good ways. Just wearing down the brake pads for literally no reason at all. This is something I see a lot that just doesn't make sense. One thing you really don't want to do on the highway is hit your brakes for no reason. Now, of course, there is often plenty and valid reasons to hit your brakes, but if there isn't, you shouldn't be hitting your brakes. One thing people love to do around here is brake while changing lanes. I'm not talking about in traffic. I mean when everyone has plenty of room and we're all able to freely drive the speed limit without slowing each other down. Someone changes lanes and for no reason at all hits the brakes, like this minivan here. This van passes me and decides to move into my lane with plenty of room. All is well, and then pointless brakes. Not only is this stupid, it can cause an accident. Inconsiderate drivers will put themselves before others, in many cases creating dangerous situations. These situations are already very dangerous under normal weather conditions. When the weather changes conditions, for example when it rains and causes the ground to be wet, this creates additional danger for all of us. The car here is either an inconsiderate loser or is unaware that you have to wait for oncoming traffic if you don't have a protected arrow to turn. Whichever one of these applies, they don't belong in the driver's seat of a vehicle. Watch as they turn through the intersection as all these cars are taking off, causing everyone to have to brake and wait for this dummy to get through the intersection. Driving down this road with nothing impeding traffic, yet, as we come over this hill, this car pulls up to the intersection and pulls out in front of me going much slower than she should be. As I move over and pass her, I am able to see and confirm she's looking down at her phone, way more than she's looking up at the road. I cannot express enough that wherever you're going, whatever your agenda is, it's not more important than all of us surviving out here. As I'm exiting this parking lot, I check both ways for traffic, and not only do I see that it's clear, I also notice that this light is turning red, which gives me a tiny bit more assurance that someone won't come along in this lane as I'm pulling out. As I pull out, watch how this light is already red, and this car has not reached the intersection. And even though a car just pulled out across their path, they were not only not smart enough to mind the light, they didn't even have the sense to slow down. And now I've had enough for today.